Yeah.
That gall.
Yeah, so
new. Is it appearance or strength?
Yeah, so I mentioned yesterday that I would ask my brother-in-law, who's a cipher, about this whole Torah thing. So first of all, as we noted, that there's the machlokes dispute about the way we learned it was that the solution makes the parchment better, stronger, and therefore can withstand the stitching. And that's the way the halacha is. And I suppose that's why Steinsaltz translate directly that way, because that's the halacha. But Rashi has a different understanding in that the solution makes it worse, because it discolors the parchment. Makes it darker. And therefore, you shouldn't stitch it.
And with white threads, it makes it too much.
Yeah, but
one's aesthetics and one's functionality.
Yeah, now the reality is aesthetics.
Dark parchment and it's white. It's going to look odd.
The reality is we do treat all of our parchment with solution, and as you can see, it's not that dark. It's not so dark that if you had a white stitching, it would look that terrible. And the reality is the parchment is much stronger because of the solution. So that's the way that's the halacha. Now, with respect to the patches you asked about yesterday and the glue. So I was asking my brother-in-law about what the common practice is, and he said, there's a difference, first of all, between a tear and a puncture. Right? A tear you can stitch. A puncture, if there's a hole, you can't stitch it. You'd be tightening the parchment. You have to have some other remedy. So if there's a tear, if there's a rip, and that's what we're dealing with here in our halacha here, is stitching it with respect to that tear. Whether it's the line, whether it's the extension of 2 lines or 3 lines in all those halachas. But if there's a puncture, so he said it's very common if there's a puncture in the margins, in the top or bottom, to put patch and use glue. That's rather common even today. He said you'll also find in older Torahs where there's a puncture even in the words. You'll find that they'll take a patch and put it on the back and then write out the word that's been punctured. And he said in older Torahs you'll find that. It's a kula, it's a leniency, and presumably it's leniency because of how expensive it was to produce Torahs, so they made this kind of leniency. But he said it was done, and you will find in older Torahs. Newer Torahs, where we have an easier time getting new Torahs, it's not so common that people would do that because it doesn't look so nice. When you have
swap out a sheet.
You can swap out a sheet is easier than changing a whole new Torah, but certainly nicer than a patch, right?
How would a Torah get punctured?
Over time, wear and tear.
A very simple reason, not so much here, but I know from Spartacus because they told me, you get kind of insects in a warm climate.
Oh, okay.
And they actually puncture.
So you'll have a little insect that will actually eat away at the parchment.
He showed me they're kind of like, what do we call them, like bookworms, whatever. They actually ate through the parchment, and you see it's like all the way through the parchment.
Wow. Okay, so I guess if that was common back in the day, then you have a big problem if you had to switch out. If every time there's a puncture, you'd have to switch it out if you had these animals eating through. At any rate, but he told me that it's also more common he said he's not 100% sure, but he said he doesn't think the common practice is that a half a word we put on a parchment, on a patch, and a half a word on the original parchment. Better to cut out a whole, let's say there's a puncture half a word. He said he would think that it's better to cut out the entire word, put a parchment, and write the new word. Yeah, because it just looks nicer. Otherwise, you're looking at half a word on one parchment, on the patch, and then the other word on the other parchment, which was your original. It would look nicer if you had a whole word.
It's like putting it above the line.
With the Sefer Torah, with the Hashem's name.
Word instead of.
Yeah. So he said that's the common practice. That's the way.
Hashem's name. That wouldn't be possible.
You can't cut out Hashem's name. No. Oh, well, maybe cutting it out is not the same as erasing it. So maybe you could even cut out Hashem's name.
With the problem with Hashem's name, they cut out the word and they put a patch.
Put a patch and write Hashem's name again. Yeah. So there you go. So actually, the truth is because the prohibition is against erasing it, not necessarily cutting it out. You cut it out and you intern it. You bury it.
Well, let's say they cut the cut, for example, like the hay cut, for example, or the vav, or whatever.
Yeah.
You cut out the word.
Yeah.
And then you.
The same thing is true. So this is the same thing is true not only of puncturing, of ripping, because you can't stitch in the middle of a word. Right? We didn't learn in the Gemara, but I mentioned the halacha is you can't stitch in the middle of a word. So if there's a tear in a word, maybe they would treat it like a puncture and cut out the whole word and write a new word and patch it, or cut out the whole word, put a parchment patch with glue, and then write the new word.
It'd have to be, but if it's a line through a word, it's going through, and if it's going through multiple lines, then it would have to be right there.
Then you'd have to you have to make a big patch, which might have just random words on it, but when you put it in the back, it reads.
Right.
Yeah, the Rabbi mentions you can put a patch with a tear with glue, a parchment and glue, and you.
Yeah, parchment glue on the back as a patch. When I say patch, I mean parchment patch made of the same material as your Torah.
And that glue is some special glue, I suppose.
Doesn't seem like it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, doesn't seem like it's a special glue. just seems like it's an ordinary glue that would actually work. But I imagine there is some sort of glue that works
No,
best
I
with
mean,
parchment, but I don't mean that there's some special halacha.
Naturally,
Not that it doesn't seem like it.
And the patch that they put so that you could write the word again is stitched? Always?
No, so glued.
Oh, you can glue it.
Yeah, if you stitch it, then you'd be stitching it
Right
through words, or
through letters,
yeah, it would be
that's-
glued.
It has
Glued.
to be glued. Okay.
Glued. Yeah, the parchment, the patch is glued.
Well, originally.
So glue is okay.
glue-
But over here, we're talking about specifically a rip, not a tear, a tear, not a puncture, and you could stitch it.
Originally, glue does come from animals.
yeah.
Animals or sap.
Or
Doesn't glue
or
usually come from
combination
sap
of the two.
or combination of the two?
Yeah, so it was all.
Kosher ingredients in theory, anyway.
Yeah, you must become a
It must. It should. I imagine the glue has to be made of kosher. So I guess that would be the only requirement, that the glue has to be a kosher animal, made kosher. Look, animal but kosher, even if it's made of plants. Okay, so that's with regard to what we talked about yesterday. Now we are Boy Rav Yehuda. It's how many lines from the top? Lamed Aleph Mud Beis 31b, and we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines from the top. And the line begins with the little dalid, and then it says begidin, avoloi begridin, and then loi, and then boy. Yeah, middle of the line. Boy Rav Yehuda bar Abba. Rav Yehuda bar Abba raised the following query. The word boy or iboya, anything with that root word, is a kind of question in which the person asking is not challenging. He is simply inquiring, just wants to know something. Not because he has an agenda, right? In other times when the Gemara asks a question, there's an agenda. The person's challenging or disputing or refuting, depending on what type of question. But here it's just an inquiry. So anytime you see a word, an introduction to a question with this root word, boy, which means he inquired of them, they inquired of him, he inquired of him, depending on whether it's plural or singular, but the root word is boy, and if that's the word being introducing your question, you know it's a query, an inquiry. So he asked, bein daf ladaf, if the tear was not between words as we had it yesterday, in which we gave the limitations, saying that it has to be only the extension of 2 lines, not 3 lines, and it has to be, we'll go with the halacha, that it has to be treated with a solution so it's strong enough to withstand the stitching. But if it was on, not between the words, but between columns, so in the margins between columns, so we're less concerned about the aesthetics there, or ben shita l'shita, or even between lines, so it's not going vertically between words, but horizontally between lines, giving you more space to stitch without ruining the aesthetics of the text. So do the same limitations apply or not? Maybe I can stitch even when it's 3 lines length. So what's the law? Are there limitations on how big the tear is to prevent me from using stitch to close it up? Says the Gemara, teku, unresolved question. The word teku, that's what it means. It means unresolved. But when I was in yeshiva, they taught us, when I was like a younger boy, when I first started learning Gemara, you typically begin learning Gemara with chapter 2 of Masechta Bab Metzia, El Metzias, in which the beginning is lots of tekus, lots of unresolved questions. And they taught us that teku stands for, it's an acronym, Tishbi. Tishbi is a name for Eliyahu Hanavi. Elijah the prophet is called Tishbi, the one who brings salvation.
Tishbi.
Yeah, exactly. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbi. Tishbi means salvation, the one who brings salvation. So Tishbi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. Yetaretz will answer kushes, challenges, va'aboyis, and inquiries. So we're saying we don't know the answer, and Mashiach comes, Eliyahu Hanavi will tell us the answer. So literally teku means unresolved, but it was like a kind of cute little acronym. Tishbi, Yetaretz, kushes, va'aboyis. Eliyahu Hanavi will come and answer all questions and inquiries. So it's an unresolved question. There's all kinds of rules as to what you do when there's an unresolved question. Do you go strict? Do you go lenient? Depending on the section of the Torah, but generally speaking, we go strict. Which would mean the limitations mentioned before about the extension of 2 lines or 3 lines applies even in the margins.
Margins means between columns?
Between columns or
at the end,
horizontally between lines.
or between lines. Okay.
Meaning not vertically between lines, where it makes it more difficult. to stitch, but even horizontally between lines, where it might be easier. Okay, Amar Rav Zeiri says, Amar Rav Chananel, name of Chananel, Amar Rav, name of Rav. Mezuzah, a mezuzah, shekasa, that's been written, shtayim. Each column is only the extension of, the length of 2 words. So it's very narrow. We mentioned before, when we were talking about the typeset for Torah, we said that your column should be the amount of space it would take you to write the word lemishbachaysehem, which is a word of 10 letters, to write that 3 times. So columns in the Torah got to be somewhere around 30 words, 30 letters, I'm sorry. Mezuzahs can be much narrower than the columns of a Torah. So the Gemara asks, or states, I should say, that a mezuzah that's written 2 words in each line, making the column very, very narrow. So says Zeiri, Ksheda, it's a kosher mezuzah. It's allowed to be very narrow. So it would be very, very long and narrow if you had 2 lines per word. I guess it'd be very difficult to roll it. Certainly the way we roll it, which we'll learn about soon. Continues Rabbi Zeiri, the name of Rav Chananel, the name of Rav. Or maybe not. Iboyalahu, the following inquiry was asked of them. So again, the same root word, Iboya. Somebody in the singular is asking lahu of them. Shtayim v'shalosh v'achas. If he wrote it where the first line has 2 words, the next line has 3 words, and the next line has 1 word. So if you look at the right side, you'll see a bunch of boxes with samples on the right side. So look at the first box. You see the first line has V'hayu advarim, 2 words. The next one has Ha'el asher anochi, 3, and then the third line has 1 word. So you kept them writing the Torah like that: 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. I'm sorry, your mezuzah, not your Torah. So the line would the column would look something like this. So it was a way of writing poetry back in the day. When they used to write poetry back in the day, it was an art to writing the poetry, and they would do all kinds of shapes with their writing. And the Gemara is asking if you can do that with a mezuzah. So what's the law? So this query was presented in the study house. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Nachman bar Yitzchak responded, Kol shekain, certainly it's okay. Why? Sha'asa kashira, because he's making it like a song. He's making it like the way you would poetry. So it's beautiful. Why not?
Also the shir of the Torah, not the shir.
Shir Torah, which is the way poetry written, but
the
shir is written a little bit different, as we'll explain in a moment.
So this is an aesthetic.
An aesthetic thing. Yeah, he's saying it looks beautiful. Why not? There's a pattern. It goes wider and narrower, wider and narrower. It's a nice pattern, and it looks nice. This is what Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, and therefore he says it's kosher. So Meisvei, the Gemara presented the following challenge. So before the question opened up with Iboya, which is an inquiry, now the question is opening with the word Meisvei. The word Meisvei is a challenge presented by a text that predates the person speaking. So the person speaking here is Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who is a sage of the Gemara, and the Gemara is now going to raise a challenge from a text of the Mishnaic age. So it's a challenge based on a text that predates the person speaking. What does it say? It says as follows. It says like this: Asa kashira. If you wrote text that is not a poem in the way in which you would write a poem, oy shira, or if you wrote a poem, there are parts in the Torah that are poems. Az yashir, ha'azinu, there are parts of the Torah that are song, that are poems. So if you wrote the parts of the Torah that are poems, that are songs, kamoisa, as you would normal letters, psula, it's invalid. So the Az Yashir and the Azinu are written a little bit differently, but they're both written with broken up lines and patterns. The Az Yashir is written where you have 3 words in the center, and then the next line has words on either side with space in the middle. The next line, words in the center. The next line, like laying a brick. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Right. So it's that kind of pattern. Ha'azinu is written in on the margins with space in the middle. Word on either side, making it like columns where the outer side is straight and the inner side is bumpy based on how long the words are, making a space in the middle. But it's a poetic way of writing things. So it says this text, this Mishnaic age text, that if you wrote proper parts of the Torah as you would a poem, no kosher. And the same thing reverse. If parts of the Torah that are poetry, that are song, Ha'azinu and Az Yashir, if you wrote that as you would the rest of the Torah, it's invalid. And therefore the question is the challenge is raised. You just finished saying that a mezuzah could be written like a poem, two words, 3 words, 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, 1 word in the columns. And now the mezuzah is not a poem. It's not a song. It's not a part of the Torah that's a song, and therefore seemingly it should be invalid. This is the Gemara's challenge. The Gemara resolves this challenge by saying, you know what's the obvious answer?
Sacred Torah versus mezuzah.
Kitanya hi, when that Mishnah stated that you're not allowed to write proper parts of the Torah as you would a poem, the Sefer Torah. It's talking about when you're writing a Sefer Torah. So when you're writing a Sefer Torah, then the parts of the Torah that are not poetry, that are not song, write them normal. The parts of the Torah that are poetry and are song, write them like a poem or a song. The Gemara elsewhere describes exactly how that should be done. But when it comes to mezuzah, no such restriction applies, and therefore when Rav Nachman Yitzchak said that you're allowed to write the mezuzah in such a poetic, artistic fashion, it seems so far to be a valid statement.
Does it also imply the shel Rosh and shel Yod of Tefillin?
Tefillin? I don't know. Oh, it doesn't say anything about that here, so I don't know. Okay. Itmar Nami, we've also been taught by sage of the Gemara's generation, not from the Mishnah, as follows. Amr Rabbi Bar Chana, Rabba son of Bar Chana said, Amr Rabbi Chana, Rabbi Chanan. Amrullah and others have the same tradition, not in the name of Rabba and Rabbi Chanan, but rather Amr Rabbi Acha Bar Chana, that it wasn't Rabba son of Bar Chana, but it was Rabbi Acha son of Bar Chana, who said Amr Rabbi Chanan and Rabbi Chanan. So it's either one brother or another brother who said the name of Rabbi Chanan. Namely, what's the statement of Rabbi Chanan? Mezuzah, and mezuzah, she'asah, that was made, shtayim v'shalosh v'achas, if it was written in such a fashion as described before by Rabbi Nachman, or described by the inquiry, where a person wrote it 2 words, 3 words, and then 1 word. His column was written in such a poetic text, artistic text. First column 2 words, next column 3 words, next column 1 word, and so on. Sheda, it is permissible. It's kosher. Meaning you're allowed to make your mezuzah written in such an artistic fashion. Or bavad, with 2 exceptions. Shlo yasenu k'koiva, it shouldn't be made like a tent. That is to say, it shouldn't be made like this, where the top line is narrow and it gets progressively wider. So in the second box on the right, you'll see how it is. The top line has 1 word, the next one has 2 words, the next one has 3 words, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, etc. In this tent style. And likewise, bavad, and with another exception, shlo yasenu k'zanav, you shouldn't make it like a tail. Exact reverse, where it starts off wide and progressively gets narrower. So if you look at the third box on the right, you'll see the first line has 3 words, the next one has 2 words, the next one has 1 word, and your entire mezuzah is written like that. So you can write your mezuzah poetically, but not in triangular shape. Not triangle upside down, where it gets wide and narrower like a tail, or like a tent, where it's wide at the bottom and narrow at the top. Those are the 2 exceptions. Why? I'm not sure. Like, why is that less artistic than others? I don't know what the rules of stylistic, artisanal poetry writing is, but apparently these 2 are no good. Unless there's some halachic reason for it, I don't know.
Is it aesthetics or we don't?
Sorry?
Is it aesthetics?
It seems like it's aesthetics. It seems like it's aesthetics.
Apparently.
Apparently it's aesthetics, but I don't know why these 2 styles are not acceptable, whereas the other one is acceptable. I'm not sure. I don't know the rules.
That would be an actual shape versus
just maybe
random.
And the other one also seems like it has a pattern: 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. But for some reason, this is no good. Okay, one more halacha. Amar Rav Chizda said, Al haaretz, the last 2 words of the mezuzah, which is Al haaretz. I have here so you can see it. The last verse in the mezuzah is so that God will bless you with length of days for you and your children. Al adama, on the land, which God promised to your forefathers, to give to them, like the days of the heavens on the earth. That's the ending of the last few words. Like the days of the heavens on the earth, that you'll have long days, like the length of the heavens on the earth. Okay, those are the last words. So it says Rav Chizda, Al haaretz, the last 2 words, Al haaretz, peshita achron, should be written on the last line alone. So the last line on mezuzah only has 2 words. Al haaretz. That's it. But where? Ikadami b'soif shita. Some say it should be at the end of the line, And Ikeda Amri, and some say B'tchila Shita at the beginning of the line. So, to explain what it means, we have it here at the end of the line. If you look.
We have at the beginning.
At the beginning, I'm sorry. So you have the last two words, but Kemei Shemayim, Al Haaretz, the last two words in the beginning of the line. But there's another version that says that should be here. See it? That you put it here, not the end of the line, not the beginning of the line, the end of the line. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Sorry?
How does that make sense? It's not proper writing. You start over.
So let's read. Let's find out. Manda Amar, the one who says, B'soif Shita, that the words of Al Haaretz should be at the end of the line, not the way we have it. Why? Because the verse says, Kegoiva Shemayim Al Haaretz, like the height of heavens upon the earth. So the verse is talking about length of days, like the heavens and earth, implying that your days should be as long as the height between heavens and earth. And therefore, he says, the word heaven should be directly placed above the word earth. So if you put the words Al Haaretz at the end of the line here, then it'll be directly on the line, it'll be directly below the word Hashemayim, the heavens. So it'll be Shemayim Al Haaretz, heavens on the earth, quite literally. The word heaven would be directly on top of the word earth. One way of looking at it. But the one who says that the words Al Haaretz should be at the beginning of the line, the beginning of the last line, as we have it. So his logic is not that the heavens should be above the earth, but like the distance from heaven and earth. And therefore he wants the word heaven and the word earth to be as far apart from each other as possible. So heaven at the end of the line and earth at the beginning of the next line, making it as far as possible. So either above each other or as distance away from each other. Both of them implying the same idea that God's granting you long life like the distance from heaven and earth, either above each other or at distance, highlighting one or two of the other things. One.
Now you get it?
Sorry?
I'm speaking to him about how you raised the question.
Yeah. Okay, so one more line, one more halacha, intro to tomorrow, if you will. The second half of the statement now is intro for tomorrow. Rav Chelba says, Chazina le Rav Huna, I saw and I observed Rav Huna's mezuzah, I observed the way he made his mezuzah. The karachle, that he rolled it, me'echad klape shema, from the word echad to the word shema. That is to say, when you rolled it up, right, when you roll it, you can roll it from left to right. The word, you can see it. The word shema is at the beginning and the word echad is at the end, right? So you can roll it this way, starting from the left, going inward from the word shema to echad. You could roll it that way. And Rav Chelba is commenting that I noticed that Rav Huna was particular to do it the other way, to start from the end and roll it inward. And that's what we do. We start from the word echad, from the end, from the right side, and slowly, well actually if you're facing it to the left side, and slowly roll it inward to Shema. Okay? And likewise, v'asa parshes stumoitz. And this is the intro to tomorrow. And he made the parshes to be closed. What does it mean the parshes are closed? So I mentioned this in the past, that the word parsha, which literally translates as section. So when we say parsha nowadays, colloquially we mean the portion of the week, the section of Torah read that week. But when the halacha says parsha, it doesn't mean the section of Torah for that week. It means like these chapters in Torah. How are chapters in Torah defined? Not by the chapters we have. Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. That came much later, and that came from the Christians actually. Parshas, the sections, the chapters in the Torah are defined by, if you look at your Torah whenever you get an aliyah, you'll notice little spacings in the Torah. Those spacings are what define a parsha, a section. Now there are two types of spacings. There's one type of spacing, like you observe here, where when it gets to the end of the line, it leaves space till the end. When it gets to the end of the section, it leaves empty space till the end. Another way is, where let's say this word ended this section, there would be a space of 2 or 3 words, and then the next will continue. So that's considered stuma, it's closed. It's a closed parsha. Why? Because its ending is closed by a word, as opposed to leaving it open to the end of the line. So the stumais versus psuchais. There are some parshias, some sections of the Torah where the way you mark its ending is by leaving it open to the end of the line. That would be called psuchais, opened. Or the way it's marked is by empty space, but stumais, the empty space is closed, meaning to say the next parsha begins already in the same line with some space.
Now, does that have to be uniform from one Torah to another, or
yes?
That has to
each parsha in the Torah is either specifically psucha, open to the end of the line, or specifically stuma, where its section is ended with a closed space, but it's closed before the next line. The Rambam details every single one.
But so that has to be uniform, even though some Torahs will have more columns than
Yes,
others?
that's correct.
Okay.
Regardless of how many columns you have, this is uniform. So says Rav Chalba, I observed that Rav Hunna's Mezuzah, there are two parshas in Mezuzah, two sections of the Torah in Mezuzah. Number 1 and 2. So his Mezuzah was not like ours. His Mezuzah, the next parsha, V'hayam Shemaya, began on the same line as the ending of this one, V'sharecha. There's some space, because it's a distinctive parsha, but it was stumos, it was closed. It started on the same line, as opposed to the way we have it on the next line. And God willing, to more on that, on two parshas in Mezuzah, and what the logic is of keeping them stumos, a closed section, or psuchos, an open section. More on that tomorrow, God willing. Have a wonderful day.